Three identical boys vanished on a summer afternoon in 1944, and the arrest that followed tore a town apart. For decades, everyone believed the case was closed, but when DNA from a forgotten crime lab surfaced 80 years later, everything changed, because what investigators found wasn't just evidence of murder. It was proof that memory itself can survive the grave. This is the story of the vanished triplets and the teacher who never really left. If you're new here, subscribe, hit the bell, and stay with us to the end. The summer of 1944 shimmered, endless, golden, and just bright enough to hide what was coming. In the small town of Ash Hollow, Texas, people still talked about the war, about sons overseas and sugar rations. But life moved with the unhurried rhythm of dusty afternoons and Sunday service bells. The Archer family lived at the edge of town, where the land flattened into scrub fields and the wind carried the scent of mesquite. Thomas Archer, a factory worker exempted from the draft due to an old leg injury, lived there with his wife Margaret and their three identical sons, Henry, Howard, and Hugh, 8 years old that summer, curious and inseparable. Neighbors said the triplets could always be spotted together, barefoot in the yard, their laughter echoing like one shared voice. They were known for their matching suspenders and a habit of finishing each other's sentences. To see one was to see all three, a symbol of the town's innocence, something pure, amid wartime uncertainty. On June 18, 1944, whatever innocence Ash Hollow had left walked out into the heat and never came back. That Sunday, the boys disappeared from the Archer property, sometime between church and supper. Margaret said she last saw them playing near the old windmill, chasing a paper plane Henry had folded from a ration slip. When she called them for dinner, the yard was empty, no sign of struggle, no footprints leading away from the fence, only a single muddy handprint on the windmill's base, and 3 sets of tiny suspenders hanging neatly on the clothesline. The sheriff organized a search that lasted weeks. Hundreds of townsfolk combed through fields, wells, and nearby creeks. Airplanes from Fort Bliss scanned the area, nothing. By autumn, the case went cold. Theories swirled. A traveling salesman, a vagrant, maybe coyotes, but none explained why 3 boys would vanish at once, without a sound, leaving their clothes behind. And then there was Dr. Silas Harrow, the quiet physician who lived 2 houses down. He volunteered to help in the search, offered his car, even cooked meals for the volunteers. But when the sheriff asked where he'd been, the afternoon the boys disappeared, his answer, making house calls, never quite satisfied anyone. The investigation faded as war headlines returned to the front page. By the time peace came, the Archer family had moved away. The old farmhouse rotted, the windmill rusted, and the town learned not to ask questions. It couldn't bear to answer. It would take 79 years and a routine blood test from a retired man in Oregon to rip the veil off what really happened to the Archer triplets. Ash Hollow, Texas, 2023. The house at the edge of Ash Hollow had long since fallen to ruin. The locals called it the Archer Place, though nobody alive remembered the family anymore. Its windows gaped like eye sockets, and the porch tilted under the weight of decades. When Detective Marla Keene arrived that morning, she stood for a moment, just staring at the structure. 80 years, she murmured. And it still smells like a secret. She wasn't there for ghosts, at least not officially. Her team had been sent to process a construction discovery, a human jawbone found under the floor of the property's west wing, unearthed during a real estate renovation. The property developer expected an archaeological relic. What Marla saw was something colder. The bone was small, childlike. Inside, Sunlight streamed through holes in the roof, cutting narrow beams through the dust. The floorboards had been pulled up in a section near the old fireplace. Beneath the warped planks, a cavity of compacted dirt revealed a tangle of small yellowed fragments. "Looks like multiple individuals," said forensic specialist Dion Patel, crouching with a light, 3, maybe more. "Hard to tell until we get it to the lab." Marla's throat tightened. She knew the folklore. Everyone in Texas did. The vanished Archer triplets. She'd heard it as a child in a campfire story version. They played near the windmill. Then the windmill called them home. But she was a detective, not a believer. Until that moment, when she saw the child-sized bones, she hadn't considered that the legend might be literal. Dion held up a shard of fabric, lifted with tweezers. "Check this out. Old cotton weave. Looks like suspenders strap material." A hush fell. Marla exhaled slowly. "Get everything bagged. I want full carbon dating and DNA sequencing. Let's see if ghosts bleed truth." 2 days later, the call came from the State Forensics Lab in Austin. "We've run mitochondrial DNA on the samples," the technician said. 3 distinct profiles, all male, all siblings, identical triplets. Marla's heart kicked once. Hard. "You're certain?" "Statistically certain. We cross-referenced an open genealogical database. And, well, this is where it gets strange. We've got a partial match from a man in Oregon, 68 years old. Says he's adopted. His name's Franklin Harrow." Marla froze. The name scraped across her memory like a match striking Harrow. Dr. Silas Harrow, the physician from the 1944 case files. "Run that again," she said. "Check for Y chromosomal consistency. I want to know exactly how this man is related to Silas Harrow and to the Archers." Over the next week, the puzzle began to take shape. The DNA wasn't random. Franklin Harrow was the biological son of Silas Harrow and a genetic first cousin to the Archer triplets, meaning Silas and Margaret Archer were siblings by blood. But the official records from 1944 said Margaret had no surviving family. Marla drove back to the Archer house that night, long after sunset. The crickets were loud, and the heat of the day still clung to the walls. She stood at the old windmill, its rusted blades unmoving, and tried to imagine the moment 3 boys had vanished. She thought of the DNA, the lies, the missing mother. Then she looked down. In the dirt, the faint impression of a child's hand was visible, where the soil had shifted. It was as if the earth itself remembered. And beneath that memory, Marla felt it, the unmistakable thrum of something larger, waiting to be uncovered. The Archer triplets hadn't simply vanished. They'd been taken home. Rain swept over Ash Hollow 2 nights later, blurring the edges of the town's past and present. The sheriff's office had reopened the Archer file, under Marla Keene's lead, though most of what she received were brittle sheets and fading photographs. She sat at her desk, lamplight glancing off the cracked leather of a 1940s evidence binder. The original sheriff's notes were barely legible. "Boys last seen 4:12 p.m. Windmill Field, no witnesses." Someone had written the words, "Harrow assisting search" in pencil at the margin. Later crossed out. Marla turned to a map of the area. The Archer home and Dr. Silas Harrow's house had shared the same dirt road, less than half a mile apart. Today, the Harrow property was gone, demolished in the 1970s when the county reroaded the highway. But deeds still existed. According to the records clerk, both plots had once been registered under the same trust, not Archer, not Harrow, but the Hollow Foundation. A front, maybe. She jotted the name on a pad. 2 houses, she whispered. 1 name. At 7 a.m., she drove to the county archives, a squat brick building that smelled of dust and mildew. The archivist, a patient woman named Ruth, led her through metal aisles until they reached a box marked Property and Estate, 1940 to 1945. Inside lay a collection of receipts, blueprints, and, surprisingly, a patient ledger. The cover read, Dr. S. Harrow, Oak Clinic. The first pages listed routine ailments, tonsillitis, influenza, sprained ankles. Then, beginning in May 1944, the tone shifted. Each entry carried initials instead of names and cryptic notations in the margins. Type H specimen 2, reaction positive. Replication inconsistent. Marla flipped faster. The last dated entry read, June 17, 1944. HHH, triple sample acquired. Her pulse quickened. Henry, Howard, Hugh, of the Archer triplets. She photographed every page and drove straight to the lab. Dion was there, bent over bone samples beneath a halogen lamp. He looked up, bleary-eyed. You look like you haven't slept. I haven't, she said, dropping the ledger onto the counter. You ever hear of wartime human experiments outside federal oversight? He frowned. There were whispers. Local doctors trying to develop serums for soldiers, radiation, disease resistance, that sort of thing. But most of that's myth. Marla opened to the June entries. What if it wasn't myth here? They read together in silence. The ink had bled with age, but the meaning was unmistakable. Silas Harrow had been conducting blood replication trials, seeking a hereditary immunity pattern. His notes mentioned identical genetic material, and one chilling line at the bottom. Success requires sacrifice. Dion exhaled slowly. Christ. He used the boys. The idea sat between them, heavy and unreal. Marla's phone buzzed. The state genealogy unit. She put it on speaker. Detective Keene. We traced Franklin Harrow's line further. His Y DNA doesn't just connect to the Archers. It intersects with an unregistered male sample found in a 1956 cold case. Same signature markers, same micro-deletions. What cold case? Unnamed juvenile. Remains from an abandoned farmhouse west of Dallas. Listed only as Child EX. Probable age 8. The sample matches one of your triplet markers. So, one of the Archer boys turned up in 1956. Looks that way. The body was labeled Specimen 2 in local records, but never identified. Marla felt a chill. Specimen 2. Exactly what Harrow called them. When she hung up, the room seemed smaller. Dion rubbed his temples. If one died in 56, maybe the others lived longer. He could have kept them hidden for years. Unless someone helped him, Marla said. Harrow had connections. He couldn't bury 3 children alone. Thunder rolled outside. The power flickered, and for an instant, the lab plunged into darkness. When the lights returned, the pale bones on the table seemed to glow. Marla leaned over them, whispering as if to the dead. I'll find out what he did to you. I promise. That night, she drove to the last surviving house from that era. The former residence of Sheriff Raymond Doss, whose son still lived there. The man, Cal Doss, opened the door, wearing an oxygen tube and a skeptical look. Detective Keene, you folks stirring up the Archer story again? I need whatever your father left behind, notes, letters, anything. He hesitated, then motioned her inside. The living room smelled of liniment and old wood. Cal shuffled to a cabinet and withdrew a small box. He used to drink himself blind after that case, he said. Said the truth was worse than the lie. Inside were a revolver, a rusted badge, and a sealed envelope. Marla opened it carefully. A single photograph slid out, grainy black and white, showing Dr. Harrow standing beside 3 hospital cots. Each cot held a child covered to the neck with a sheet. Beside one sheet was a label, HHH, June 18, 1944. Cal's voice cracked. Dad said he found that in Harrow's clinic. After the doc disappeared, the county judge told him to destroy it for morale, they said. Marla stared at the photo until her vision blurred. He didn't destroy it, she said softly. No, Cal replied. He kept it under his floorboards 50 years, said someday someone would ask. Outside, rain hissed against the windows. Marla slipped the photo into a plastic sleeve. Someone just did. On her drive back to the motel, lightning flashed across the plains, illuminating the windmill's silhouette in the distance. For a heartbeat, she imagined 3 small figures beneath it, waiting, whispering names that time had tried to erase. When she reached her room, she pinned the photograph beside the DNA chart on the wall. 3 identical profiles, 3 lives, stolen for science, and a doctor who'd vanished like his victims. She wrote 2 words beneath the picture: Find Harrow. The storm subsided near midnight. Somewhere beyond the motel window, a train passed, its whistle long and mournful. Marla watched the raindrops merge and run down the glass like tears. She had reopened an 80-year-old wound, and the town would bleed secrets before it healed. The motel room smelled faintly of rain and stale coffee. Detective Marla Keene sat cross-legged on the carpet. Crime scene photos spread before her like playing cards. The wind outside rattled the windows, carrying the low hum of freight trains that passed through Ash Hollow at midnight. She should have been sleeping, but her mind kept circling back to one question. If Harrow vanished in 1944, who kept his secrets alive? A dull knock at the door broke the thought. She checked the peephole. Dion Patel, holding a box wrapped in butcher paper. From the archives, he said, as she opened the door. Ruth found this in a mislabeled drawer. It's Harrow's personal correspondence, bundled with county medical invoices, looks untouched for decades. Inside were 3 bundles of letters, their envelopes brittle, the ink browned to rust. Each bore the same return address: Hollow Foundation, P.O. Box 23, Dallas, Texas, and postmarks from 1943 to 1944. Marla slipped on gloves and opened the first. June 3rd, 1943. My dear Dr. Harrow, your last shipment demonstrated promising replication. The Bureau believes identical bloodlines may yield the stability we require. Continue the trials. Results must remain confidential. National security demands discretion. R.M. She frowned. The Bureau. Dion scanned the letterhead's watermark. Could be the War Research Bureau. They handled experimental vaccines during the Pacific Campaign. So Harrow wasn't just a local doctor. He was part of a wartime program. Another letter, dated 2 weeks later, chilled her further. We require 3 compatible subjects of identical genetic makeup. The closer their environment, the stronger the yield. Marla whispered. He took the triplets because they were identical. Perfect controls. Lightning cracked outside. For an instant the room flashed white, the photographs on the wall leaping to life. 3 boys in suspenders, smiling forever. She turned to the last letter, postmarked the day before the disappearance shipment received. Ensure disposal of prior material. Extraction team en route. Her pulse quickened. Extraction team, she said aloud. Meaning, he wasn't alone. Dion pointed to a faint signature under the initials R.M. That could be Robert Marin. There was a Major Marin attached to the Bureau's Biodefense Unit. Marla reached for her phone, searching federal archives. The name appeared in a 1946 court file. Charges dismissed, records sealed. But one note caught her eye. Residence, Ash Hollow, Texas, 1944 to 1948. He lived here, she whispered. After the war. The motel clock ticked past 1 a.m. when she finally shut her laptop. Sleep came in fragments, dreams full of whispering voices and the click of typewriter keys. Morning light broke over the plains, pale and clean. Marla drove to the remains of the Marin property, on the town's north edge, a sagging barn and a stone foundation overrun with cactus. The windmill creaked faintly in the distance, its rusted blades turning just enough to squeal. She ducked under the barn's lintel. Dust motes swirled in the sunlight. The floorboards had split, revealing gaps filled with old mail sacks. She knelt, tugged one free. Inside were dozens of letters, all addressed to Dr. Silas Harrow. Never sent, never opened. The first few were mundane, but then came one dated August 1944, months after the boys vanished. Silas, you went too far. The Bureau has dissolved, the tests discontinued. They're calling it Project Helix now, burying it under civilian funding. Burn everything. If anyone finds the children, they'll hang us both, RM. Marla stared at the signature until the edges of the paper blurred. Behind her, Dion's voice echoed softly. He tried to stop him. Or cover his own tracks, she said. Either way, Harrow didn't burn everything. She looked toward the back wall. A set of shelves leaned precariously, their planks warped but intact. She ran her hand along the underside and felt metal, thin, cold, a false panel. With a careful pull, the board slid loose, revealing a rust-stained tin box. Inside lay 3 glass vials sealed with wax. Each contained a dark residue like dried blood. Labels flaked but legible. H1, H2, H3. Her stomach turned. He kept their samples. Dion crouched beside her. We can test them. If any DNA remains, we'll know exactly what he was doing. Marla wrapped the vials in cloth, sealing them in evidence bags. When she stepped outside, the wind had shifted, warm and heavy with rain. Across the field, she could see the steeple of Ash Hollow's church rising above the cotton trees. The bell motionless. A memory surfaced, a photograph she'd seen in the sheriff's file of the town's 1945 memorial service. Among the mourners stood a young man in uniform, his face half turned to the camera. The caption had read simply, Major Robert Marin attends local tribute. He hadn't left town after all. That evening, Marla returned to the motel. She pinned the new letters to the wall, beside the photo of Harrow in the 3 cots. Red thread connected the names, Harrow Arrow, Marin Arrow, Project Helix. Dion called from Austin just before midnight. Preliminary results from the vials. There's viable genetic material, ancient but readable. And it matches one of the Archer bone profiles, almost perfectly. But here's the twist. The blood shows markers not found in any modern population. It's like an engineered mutation. Meaning Harrow might have succeeded whatever he tried to create. It survived in their cells. The line went silent, except for faint lab noises. Marla rubbed her eyes. If he succeeded, maybe that's why he kept them alive, to see how long the mutation lasted. She glanced at the map pinned to the wall. Between Ash Hollow and Dallas lay endless miles of prairie, dotted with forgotten bunkers and abandoned hospitals from the war years, places a man could disappear. Her reflection stared back from the motel mirror, tired, haunted. You buried them under science, she whispered, addressing ghosts she could almost feel listening, but their blood still speaks. Outside, a lone coyote called from the hills. Somewhere in the darkness, a windmill creaked once, then went still. The Archer triplets had become a government secret, their graves a laboratory. And someone, maybe even Marin's descendants, had been guarding that secret ever since the state forensics lab in Austin smelled of bleach and humming machinery. Detective Marla Keene stood behind a sheet of glass, watching Dion and two geneticists handle the ancient vials under sterile light. Each movement was ritual. Unseal, dilute, amplify, compare. Science as seance. Through the intercom, Dion's voice came soft but certain. "We're sequencing H1 now. You might want to see this." The monitor filled with colored peaks and letters, ITCG. The rhythm of life itself, lined in orderly spikes. But this strand was wrong. The computer flagged mutation after mutation, anomalies clustered around chromosome 7. The same pattern appeared in H2 and H3, each more pronounced than the last. "It's an contamination," Dion said. "The mutation's hereditary, but it's foreign, almost like viral integration." Marla frowned. "You mean engineered or infected?" he replied. "Something was introduced to them. Maybe a vaccine prototype. Maybe a pathogen. Harrow was trying to create a hereditary resistance. And instead," she said quietly, "he created ghosts." Dion glanced through the glass. Whatever he did, it left a genetic fingerprint. If any descendants exist, we can find them. Marla's heart stirred with both hope and dread. "Do it. Run every genealogical database we've got. Look for anyone carrying those same anomalies." While the lab ran its algorithms, Marla drove back toward Ash Hollow. The sky was hard blue, the highway empty except for the occasional buzzard. As the miles passed, her mind replayed the timeline. June 17th. The ledger entry, June 18th. Disappearance. Extraction team. The day after, Harrow vanished. Marin stayed, and 3 boys became samples labeled H1, H2, H3. By the time she reached the county line, her phone buzzed Dion again. "We've got a hit. A partial match from a living subject, female, age 32. Registered under the name Lydia Harrow. She donated blood last year during a hospital screening in El Paso. And guess what? Her mitochondrial sequence is identical to H3, meaning she's a direct descendant," Marla said. "Or clone," Dion muttered. "But let's assume descendant." Marla's grip tightened on the wheel. "Find her address." Lydia Harrow lived on the outskirts of El Paso, in a sunburnt trailer ringed by yucca. When Marla arrived, the woman was outside hanging laundry. Dark hair, gray eyes, the same angular jawline as the triplets in the photographs. She looked up warily as the detective approached. "Lydia Harrow?" Marla asked, flashing her badge. "I'd like to ask you a few questions about your family history." Lydia hesitated, then nodded slowly. "I don't know much. My mother never talked about the past. Said our blood was special but cursed." Marla followed her inside. The trailer was tidy but sparse. Religious icons on the wall, an oxygen tank in the corner. A faint humming filled the air from a small portable cooler inside it. Sealed medical vials gleamed faintly. Lydia noticed her gaze. "I donate plasma to a private clinic. They pay well. Genetic research, they said." "Which clinic?" "Helix Therapeutics." Marla froze. "You're sure about that name?" Lydia nodded. "They said I'm part of a long-term study. Started before I was born." The name hit her like a door slamming open. Project Helix, the code name from Marin's letter. The project hadn't died in 1944. It had evolved. She leaned forward. "Do you have any relatives? Father, siblings?" Lydia shook her head. "No, I was adopted. The papers list my birthplace as Haven Medical Center, but I can't find it anywhere." Marla's phone buzzed again. "Dion," she answered, keeping her tone neutral. "That clinic you mentioned," he said. "I ran it. It's a subsidiary of Marin Biotech, founded in 1961 by Robert Marin's son." Her pulse quickened. It's still family run. Yeah, and guess what? Their headquarters are 50 miles from Ash Hollow. They've got a private compound marked as restricted agricultural land. She looked at Lydia. How would you feel about coming with me? Lydia hesitated, sensing the gravity. If it helps explain why my blood glows under UV light, I'm in. They drove north that evening, the sun bleeding out across the desert. The highway shimmered with heat haze, the radio static thick as dust. Lydia spoke little, but Marla could feel the unease radiating from her. My mom used to say we were born from ashes, Lydia murmured finally. Said we had to hide, or they'd come back for us. Who's they? She never said, just that they wanted what's inside us. Marla nodded slowly. Your mother might have been right. They reached the Marin property just before dusk, a sprawling ranch surrounded by chain-link fencing and floodlights. A faded sign read, Marin Agricultural Research, authorized personnel only. But the smell wasn't of soil or feed. It was antiseptic. They parked a mile away and walked through mesquite brush until they reached a vantage point, overlooking the compound inside the main building. Lights burned through frosted windows. Silhouettes moved. 2, maybe 3 people. Dion's voice crackled through the phone. Thermal drones show a basement level under the main structure. You're looking at a hidden lab. Marla crouched low. We'll need a warrant. Already in progress, he said, but it might take days. She watched the building through binoculars. In one window, she glimpsed a glass tank glowing faintly blue, and a man in a white coat adjusting a monitor. On the wall behind him hung an old black and white photograph, Dr. Silas Harrow, unmistakable even in blur. Marla lowered the binoculars, her chest tight. He's there. What? Dion said. Not him. His image. They've canonized him. Lydia's voice trembled. What are they doing in there? Marla looked back toward the complex. If I had to guess, restarting what he began. The night wind carried the low hum of generators. In the distance, a windmill spun lazily, silhouetted against the moon, its shadow falling directly across the compound, a dark blade cutting through light. Marla felt the weight of 8 decades pressing down, the echo of children's laughter, buried under lab noise and machinery. Eyes, she whispered, the bones remember. And as she watched the facility pulse with sterile light, she realized the Archer triplets had never really been buried at all. Their bloodline was alive, engineered, multiplied, and weaponized by the very descendants of the man who'd stolen them. The past hadn't ended. It had replicated. Night came hard over the desert, the sky bruised purple and star-streaked. From the ridge, the Marin facility looked like a patch of moonlight on Earth. White walls, floodlights, and the slow pulse of machines buried underground. Marla Keene crouched beside Lydia Harrow, binoculars pressed to her eyes, every muscle waiting. At 11:07 p.m., the outer gate opened. A truck rolled through, its headlights slashing the dust. 2 guards in pale uniforms waved it forward. On its side, stenciled letters, Helix Therapeutics, Biocontainment DUV. Marla whispered, that's our way in. They followed the fence line to a maintenance shed, half hidden by tumbleweed inside. The padlock hung open, left carelessly by some worker who trusted distance more than vigilance. Beneath the tools lay an access hatch and a ladder that vanished into darkness. The air below smelled of copper and sterilizer. They descended, one rung at a time, their flashlight beams slicing through dust. The tunnel sloped toward the main building, lined with conduit and pipes. Lydia's breathing echoed, quick and shallow. How far does this go? She whispered. Long enough to keep secrets. After 10 minutes, they reached a steel door marked Service 3A. Marla tried the handle. It turned with a reluctant squeal. Beyond lay a corridor lit in dim red safety light. The hum of refrigeration units vibrated the floor. The temperature dropped sharply. Rows of stainless steel tanks lined the walls, each misting faintly at the rim. Frosted windows bore serial codes: H14, H15, H16 inside. Something floated. Blood samples suspended in amber solution. Tags dated from the 1960s onward. Lydia touched the glass. "It's them," she whispered, "my family." Marla read the oldest label aloud. H3-Original, June 18th, 1944. Her throat tightened. They preserved it. Footsteps echoed. She killed the flashlight, pulling Lydia behind a row of tanks. 2 technicians passed, pushing a cart stacked with cryogenic canisters. One spoke quietly. "Transfer batch to Level B by morning. Dr. Marin wants H3 ready for sequence replication." Still thinks he can wake it? He doesn't think. He knows the old man's serum keeps stabilizing. If the host survives, it proves Harrow's theory. The cart wheels squeaked away down the corridor. Marla exhaled slowly. "They're not just keeping blood here," she murmured. "They're keeping a host." They moved deeper, past an airlock door, into a laboratory washed in blue light. Monitors displayed gene editing sequences, scrolling in endless loops. On a central table lay a glass cylinder half filled with gel. Inside it, motionless, was a man. Tubes entered his veins, his chest barely rising beneath frost. His face familiar. Lydia gasped. "He looks like me." Marla stepped closer. "He looks like all 3 of them." A plaque read, "Specimen H, 1/subject stable, /project continuation director, R. Marin Jr." The man inside looked about 40, skin unaged, eyelashes coated with frost crystals. Decades frozen, yet preserved like a relic. The triplet who never grew old. Lydia's hands trembled. "Is he alive?" The monitor beside the tank pulsed faintly. Heart rhythm, slow but definite. "Yes," Marla whispered. "He's alive." A voice behind them cut the silence. "You shouldn't be here." They turned. A man in a white coat stood at the doorway, silver hair slicked back, a pistol steady in his hand. His ID badge read, "Dr. Robert Marin, Jr." He regarded them without surprise. "I thought the state would send someone eventually. You must be keen." And the girl. Harrow's lineage. Perfect symmetry. Marla raised her hand slightly. "You're continuing human experiments that started in 1944. "Continuing?" His smile was weary, almost paternal. "No. Perfecting. My father failed because he feared what he built. I don't." Lydia's voice cracked. "That's my blood in there. My family. You're using us." "I'm preserving you," he said. "The mutation your ancestor carried could end disease. Imagine cells that never decay." He called it the H factor. I call it immortality. Marla stepped forward. "Immortality, built on kidnapping and murder." He sighed. "History is always written by those who survive." The pistol didn't waver. "Leave. Detective, forget what you saw." Before she could answer, alarms blared, shrill, mechanical. Red lights strobed. Marin flinched, looking toward the corridor. Dion's voice burst from Marla's earpiece. "We tripped the external sensors. SWAT's 5 minutes out. Get clear." Marin swung the gun toward her. "Who else is here?" Marla dove sideways, grabbing a tray, flinging it. The weapon clattered against the floor. Lydia lunged, slamming her shoulder into his chest. They crashed against a control panel. Sparks flared. The glass cylinder hissed as coolant bled from its seams. Warning lights flashed. System breach. Marin shoved Lydia away, gasping. "You'll kill him. He's the proof." Maybe he deserves freedom, she shouted. Marla pulled Lydia toward the door. Behind them, the cylinder's glass cracked. Cold vapor flooded the lab, curling like breath from another century. A sound followed, slow, wet, like someone taking the first breath after drowning. Marin froze, staring at the tank. The man inside opened his eyes. They were a child's eyes, clear gray, impossibly young. The eyes from the 1944 photograph. Marla's voice faltered. "Oh, God!" The glass burst outward, shards scattering across the floor. The man collapsed, coughing, trembling, skin pale, as Wax Marin rushed forward, tears mixing with frost. "Hugh," he whispered, "it's all right. You're safe now." But the revived man looked past him, gaze unfocused. "Where's Mother?" he rasped. Marin hesitated. "She's long gone, my boy. You've been asleep." Hugh's hand shot up, gripping his throat with inhuman strength. The motion was fluid, reflexive, as if anger had been frozen with him and thawed intact. Alarms howled louder. Marla dragged Lydia through the door, sprinting down the corridor, as the lab filled with shouts and the clang of locking steel. They burst into the night, through a service exit, moments before the compound lights flickered and died. Behind them, a muffled explosion shook the ground, sending a plume of white vapor into the sky. Lydia fell to her knees, breath ragged. "What did we just do?" Marla stared back at the burning facility. "Maybe we ended it," she said, though the words rang hollow. From somewhere within the smoke came a single echoing cry, half human, half wind, carried out across the desert, like the memory of those lost boys calling home. The desert dawn came in bands of rose and silver. Smoke still coiled above the Marin compound, drifting east like a wounded ghost. Marla Keene stood at the police barricade, hair stiff with dust, her eyes rimmed red. Fire crews moved in slow rhythm behind her, dousing the last of the flames. The air smelled of coolant and scorched metal. Lydia sat on the tailgate of an ambulance, wrapped in a blanket. Her face was pale, her eyes fixed on the smoke. "Did anyone survive?" she asked. Marla shook her head. "They found 2 bodies. One's definitely Robert Marin. The other—" she hesitated. "They can't identify him yet." "Then he's gone," Lydia whispered. "Hugh, the frozen one?" "He may have died in the blast," Marla said, "or in the cold before it." She didn't add the thought that kept echoing in her own head. No, remains meant no proof. An agent in a Navy windbreaker approached, ID swinging from his chest. "Detective Keene, Special Agent Rivas, Federal Investigations. We're taking over the site. Your cooperation's appreciated." His tone was cordial but firm, the kind of authority that assumed obedience. Marla handed over the drive she'd recovered from the lab's computer system. "Everything we found is on there. Correspondence, research files, and what's left of the DNA data." Rivas nodded. "We'll verify. You should get checked at medical. There's residual vapor from the cryogenics." She turned away. "When will we know what they were doing in there?" "Soon as we can read the servers," he said. "For now, we classify it as a biohazard event." As the agents moved off, Lydia pulled the blanket tighter. "They're going to bury it again, aren't they? Just like before." Marla looked at her, hearing the exhaustion in the young woman's voice. "Not this time." By afternoon, the compound was sealed. Federal vehicles ringed around it like armor. Reporters gathered at the outer fence, shoving microphones toward anyone who looked official chemical spill. The headlines said, "Experimental farm accident." The truth was too strange for press releases. Marla and Lydia rode back to Silas Harrow in silence. The town looked almost untouched by the chaos. Church bells rang for morning mass. The diner sign blinked its weak neon. Only the dust carried news of the night before. At the motel, Dion was waiting, laptop open, cables snaking across the bedspread. He looked up as they entered. "You're both alive?" he said. Half disbelief, half relief. "I've been parsing the drive you sent. There's something you need to see." On screen, lines of code scrolled past, resolving into folders labeled Generation H. Post-replication inside were medical reports spanning decades. H3, viable embryo transfer, 1969. Subject L, stabilized adult host, 1990. Lydia stared. Subject L. "That's me." Marla leaned closer. "They've tracked you since birth." Dion nodded grimly. "And others. There are at least 6 living carriers worldwide. Marin called them descendants of the original immunity line." "So, there are more of me," Lydia said softly. "More like you," Marla corrected. "Whatever Harrow altered in the triplets' blood, it passed down." The next file froze all 3 of them. A photograph, time-stamped 5 years earlier, showed a man in a hospital bed, pale skin, gray eyes, the same face that had looked out from the frozen cylinder. The file name, H1- Field Sample. Patient C. Location, Marlin State Hospital. "He was alive," Marla said. "They thawed him years ago." Dion scrolled further. The last entry was a discharge notice signed by Dr. Robert Marin, Jr. Destination, Helix Facility, Ash Hollow. Lydia pressed a hand to her mouth. "He's not dead." "Maybe not," Marla said. "But if he's loose, we need to find him before they do." That night the wind returned, pushing long shadows across the highway. Marla couldn't sleep. The motel air conditioner hummed like a heartbeat. At 2 a.m., she stepped outside. The sky glittered with stars, and somewhere in the distance a coyote yipped. 3 sharp cries, perfectly spaced triplets again, calling through time. She opened her phone to record notes. AH1 possibly alive. DNA carriers active. Federal suppression likely next step. Trace surviving medical staff from Harrow's clinic. When she turned back toward the room, Lydia stood in the doorway. "You can hear it too, can't you?" "Hear what?" "The windmill. It's still turning." Marla listened. The faint metallic groan drifted from miles away. "Just the breeze," she said. But even she didn't believe it. By morning, they were on the road again, heading toward the ruins of Oak Clinic, where Harrow had once practiced. The building had collapsed into a shell of limestone, but part of the basement remained beneath layers of dirt. They found filing cabinets corroded shut. Dion pried one open. Inside were sealed glass slides, each marked with a single letter, HHMR Marla, wiped one clean. Microscope samples, tissue. Dion held it to the light. "This isn't dust, it's bone powder." She looked around the dark cellar and felt the weight of history pressing down. Every secret he couldn't carry, he buried here. As they turned to leave, Lydia's flashlight caught movement. A hand-sized shape, skittering across the floor. A rat. Nothing unusual until it paused in the beam. Its fur was pale, almost translucent, veins visible like blue threads beneath skin. Its eyes glowed dull gray. Marla crouched slowly. "Dion, trap it." They sealed the creature in a specimen box. Dion stared. "Albino. No. This is something else." Lydia shivered. "It's been living off the soil here? Off what's buried?" Marla straightened. "Then, the mutation isn't just in people anymore." They drove back to town, as thunderheads built on the horizon. In her notebook, Marla wrote one line. "The past doesn't rest. It replicates." When they reached the motel, an envelope waited at the front desk. No return address. Just her name typed neatly. Inside was a single photograph, glossy and new. It showed the Marin compound after the fire, except there was a figure standing amid the smoke. A man, bare-chested, hair slick with frost, eyes like winter sky. Across the bottom, handwritten in careful script, "You found me once. Find me again." Lydia stared at the image, her face drained of color. That's him. Marla looked out the window toward the darkening desert. Lightning flickered behind the hills, illuminating the silhouette of a distant windmill, turning slowly against the storm. The fire had not ended the story. It had simply thawed it. The morning after the photograph arrived, the sun rose dull and red, filtered through smoke that still drifted over the desert. Detective Marla Keene stood outside the motel. The image of the man, bare skin, frost-bright eyes, burned into her mind. The handwriting had been careful, almost elegant. "You found me once. Find me again." Beside her, Lydia sipped coffee that had gone cold. "He's alive," she said, voice small but certain. "He's calling you." Marla nodded slowly. "Or testing me." The sheriff's office buzzed with tension when they arrived. Federal agents were packing up their field equipment, eager to close the case under the term containment incident. Agent Rivas barely glanced up from his files. "We've finished our sweep. Compound sterile. No biological threat detected." Marla held up the photo. "Then explain this." Rivas frowned. Taking it with reluctant fingers, his jaw tightened as he studied it. "Photoshop," he said too quickly. "Then why was it hand-delivered to my motel without a postmark?" He handed it back. "Officially, Detective, this case is closed. You and your witnesses are under confidentiality orders. If you pursue it further, you're on your own." Marla smiled thinly. That's where most of the truth lives anyway. By evening, she and Lydia were back on the road, tracing the ridgeline north, where the fire's plume had once risen. The desert looked washed clean but hollow. Burned scrub, stretching for miles. Lydia kept the photograph in her lap, turning it over and over. "He looks lost," she murmured. "Not dangerous, just confused." Marla watched the horizon. A man frozen for 80 years wouldn't know where he was. The world he remembers doesn't exist. He might come here. It's all that's left of home. Then we'll wait. They reached the ruins of the old Archer property by twilight. The windmill still stood, skeletal and groaning, its shadow long across the earth. Fireflies drifted over the grass, tiny sparks against dusk. Marla spread her notes on the hood of the car, maps, DNA charts, photographs of the triplets. Lydia moved silently among the weeds, stopping near the rusted well. "Sometimes," she said softly, "I dream of this place, like I've been here before." "You probably have," Marla replied. "In your blood." Thunder rolled far away, a dry sound that rattled the windmill blades. When night fell, they built a small fire near the fence line. The desert cooled fast. Lydia sat staring into the flames, while Marla checked the perimeter through binoculars. Nothing moved, only the wind. Then, faintly, a shape appeared near the horizon. A man walking barefoot, clothes torn and gray with ash. The firelight caught his face just enough to erase all doubt. Marla whispered, "Hugh." He stopped a few yards away, wary, as if unsure whether they were real. His skin looked too pale for the desert, veins visible like blue glass beneath the surface. His eyes, clear, almost luminous, studied them in silence. Lydia rose slowly, hands visible. "You sent the photo." He tilted his head, voice rough from disuse. "They burned my home. I thought you would understand." Marla stepped forward. "I do. But you have to come with us. The people who made you, what's left of them, will try again." He shook his head. "I'm not theirs anymore." "You're human," she said gently. Hugh smiled faintly. "Half." The other half still sleeps in the cold. The fire cracked. Lydia took a hesitant step closer. You're my family, aren't you? My blood. He looked at her, as if seeing a reflection of something forgotten. You carry what we were meant to be. What Harrow made you to be, Marla said. You can help stop them. Help end it. His gaze flicked to the distant lights of Ash Hollow. It never ends. The pattern repeats. You dig up bones, they grow back. For a long moment, the only sound was the windmill turning. Then headlights flashed across the ridge. 3 pairs. Approaching fast, Marla cursed. Federal SUVs. Hugh's expression hardened. You led them. No, she said quickly. But he was already moving. He turned, sprinting into the mesquite, impossibly fast for a man barefoot, and starred. The wind kicked dust into spirals behind him. Marla grabbed her flashlight, giving chase, shouting into her radio for Dayon, who was stationed a mile down the road. Through the brush, she saw flashes of him, silver hair, white shirt, moving like a mirage. She nearly lost him in the ravine before he stumbled, one hand clutching his side. Marla reached him first, gun drawn but angled low. Stop running, she said. They'll shoot you on sight. He turned, eyes wide, breathing ragged. You think I fear death? After 80 years of it? A voice shouted behind them, Rivas, flashlight beam sweeping. Keen, step away from the subject. Marla looked between them. If they take you, you'll never be free. He met her gaze. Then remember me as human. Before she could answer, he bolted sideways into the darkness, vanishing into the scrub. Gunfire cracked, echoing off the hills. When the lights reached the spot, there was nothing but trampled sand and a faint smear of blood leading toward the riverbed. Rivas lowered his weapon, swearing. He's gone. Your mutant ghost just vanished. Marla knelt, pressing her fingers to the blood. Still warm. No, he's not a ghost, she said. He's evidence. By dawn, the search teams found nothing. Not a footprint, not a scrap of clothing. Only the windmill, creaking in the pale light, turning as if on cue back in the motel. Lydia stared at the drying blood on Marla's sleeve. He didn't want to be saved, she said. Marla poured black coffee, her hands shaking. Maybe he just didn't know how. Dion entered with a file. You should see this. Lab tested the rat sample from Oak Clinic. Same mutation, same sequence as H1's blood. So it spreads, Marla said. Through soil, through anything alive. Dion nodded grimly. Whatever Harrow made, it's adapting. Outside, the sirens of federal trucks faded into distance. The town returned to silence, as if the night had been erased. Marla looked at the map one last time. The windmill marked with a small red X beneath it. She wrote, OH1, alive. The pattern continues. The wind outside rose again, low and steady, carrying the smell of ash across the plains. Dawn in Ash Hollow looked deceptively gentle. Pale light crept along the windows of the motel, washing over maps as empty coffee cups, and the thick silence that followed a night of searching Detective Marla Keene hadn't slept. The blood sample on her desk glowed faintly under the portable UV lamp, a tiny streak of silver in the crimson across the room. Dion hunched over his laptop, eyes hollow. You're not going to like this, he said. That rat's genome shares 98% of the H-factor sequence, but there's human DNA folded in, mitochondrial markers. Marla frowned. Human? He turned the screen. A series of peaks and valleys blinked in color. Female line, Lydia's. The words dropped like stones. Lydia, still half asleep on the couch, sat up. Mine? How could that be? Marla answered softly. You've been donating plasma to Helix for years. They dumped waste into the old irrigation runoff. The soil carried your cells. Dayon nodded. It's spreading biologically, an echo of the original contamination, whatever Harrow started in 1944. It's gone environmental. Lydia pressed her hands to her temples. Then, every animal here, every person, Marla finished for her, could be carrying a trace. By afternoon, the first cases appeared. A rancher brought in livestock with translucent patches on their hides. A boy from the high school collapsed, blood shimmering faintly under emergency lights. The local doctor called Marla before the state could intervene. "I don't know what this is," he said, shaking as he peeled off his gloves. "They don't bleed red anymore." The news spread faster than the infection. Federal agents returned, sealing off roads, establishing a quarantine perimeter. Rivas confronted Marla outside the clinic, his mask pulled tight, eyes furious. "You knew," he hissed. "You had samples and didn't report this contamination." Marla stared him down. "You classified the truth out of existence. This is on your people, not mine." He leaned closer. "Containment means containment, detective. We'll neutralize every carrier if we have to." She saw the unspoken meaning. "Kill switch, clean up. And you'll call it mercy," she said coldly. That night, the town descended into unease. Power flickered, phone lines jammed. The motel became a makeshift command post. Lydia paced near the window, watching lights on the highway. "They'll erase this place," she whispered, "just like they erased the triplets." Marla rubbed her eyes. "Not if we prove it's curable." Dayon looked up from his computer. "Maybe not curable, but traceable." He opened a folder labeled H-Series Recovery. Inside was a partial DNA profile, Hughes. "If we map his bloodline against the infected, we can isolate what's spreading from what's inherited." Lydia crossed the room. "You think he's still alive out there?" Marla nodded slowly. "He sent that photo for a reason. Maybe he's watching the outcome of his own creation." Dayon hesitated. "There's more." Satellite thermal scans picked up something near the old riverbed. Body temperature, human, but cooler than normal. "Like someone who doesn't quite fit biology," Marla said. Lydia's eyes widened. "Hugh." They drove through the sleeping town at 3 a.m., headlights slicing through dust. Federal patrols prowled the highway, but Marla took the back roads. The sky was low and heavy, lightning flickering behind far hills. At the riverbed, the air smelled of ozone and decay. Mud glistened where the last rain had carved rivulets through ash. Dayon unpacked a thermal scope. "There," he whispered. A faint figure crouched beneath a broken bridge, half hidden by reeds. Marla raised her flashlight, beam trembling. Hugh turned toward them, eyes catching the light like mirrors. He looked thinner, feral, but his voice when it came was clear. "You shouldn't have followed me." Marla kept the beam low. "People are dying. You know what's happening." He stared at the water. "It's the blood remembering itself. It wants to live, even without us." "Then help us stop it," she pleaded. "Tell us what Harrow did." He stepped into the light, barefoot, shirtless, the old scars on his chest shining like frost. He taught the cells to copy memory, to hold not just genetics, but moments when we slept. They dreamed. Now, everything they touched dreams with them. Lydia took a step forward. "You mean it's alive?" "It's aware," he said simply. "Every echo in your veins is calling back to the first night in that lab. The children, the light, the fear. It remembers being taken." The river wind shifted, carrying the faint hum of generators from town. Marla swallowed hard. "If it remembers, maybe it can forgive." Hugh smiled faintly. "You still think this is about forgiveness?" He reached out, brushing Lydia's wrist. The contact was electric. Tiny sparks flickered where skin met skin. Lydia gasped. I can see it. Images. Snow, cages, glass. Marla grabbed her shoulder, break contact. Hugh released her. She's stronger than I was. Maybe she can end it. He stepped back into the shadows. Tell them the cure isn't in killing us, it's in understanding what we became. Before Marla could stop him, he turned and vanished into the darkness, moving faster than sight. By sunrise, they were back in town. Lydia sat in the passenger seat, trembling, eyes unfocused. He showed me everything, she said. The day they took them, the experiments, the freezing, it's all there, in the blood. Dayon met them outside the clinic. We need samples from you now. If you can see those memories, maybe the genetic data carries the same recording. Inside, the machines hummed, drawing crimson into glass tubes. Under UV, the fluid shimmered silver. Dayon inserted the sample into the analyzer. The screen blinked, then displayed fragments of images encoded within the sequence. Boys laughing, a Cadillac, a man in a lab coat. Marla's breath caught. It's like film. DNA as archive, Dayon whispered. Harrow turned blood into memory storage. The screen flickered once more, revealing a final image, coordinates scrawled across a lab notebook. 29.76, 89, north, 101.5, 940 west. Lydia looked at Marla. What's there? Marla checked her map. Deep desert, no towns, but there's an abandoned airfield from the 40s. Then that's where he's going, Lydia said. Where it began. Outside, the wind picked up again, carrying dust across the empty highway. The windmill turned lazily, blades whispering like voices too old to forget. Marla closed her notebook. Then that's where we'll end it. The desert around Ash Hollow ended abruptly at a jagged ridge of limestone. Beyond it stretched a plain of scorched earth where nothing grew. A forgotten runway once used by military test flights during the war. The coordinates from Lydia's DNA led straight here. By the time they arrived, the sun had begun to sink, turning the landscape copper. Marla Keene parked beside the crumbling hangar, its metal skeleton twisted by decades of wind. Dust plumed behind them like smoke. Dayon climbed out first, scanning the horizon with a drone controller. No signals, no fences, no power, he said. Place is dead. Marla shaded her eyes. Then why mark it? Lydia stared at the horizon. Because it remembers. Inside the hangar, the air was stale and cold. Despite the heat outside, a faded insignia clung to one wall. USARMYAIRFORCES/property of Project Haven. Beneath it, a sealed door led underground. Padlocked and rusted, Marla knelt, prying gently with a crowbar until the chain gave way. A smell rose up, chemical, ancient, unmistakably human. They descended a narrow stairwell, lit only by their flashlights. The walls were lined with conduits and abandoned switchboards labeled in military script. At the bottom, a corridor branched into 3. Triplets, Dayon murmured. Marla chose the left passage. The floor was coated in fine white powder, ashes or dried frost. She couldn't tell. In the first chamber they found 3 containment pods, identical to those at the Marin compound, glass opaque with residue. Inside one, faint shadows clung to the surface, fingerprints pressed from within. Lydia ran her hand over the glass. This is where he came from. Marla shone her light on a nearby desk. Folders lay scattered, brittle with age. She lifted one carefully. The cover bore the name Dr. Silas Harrow, /Human Adaptation Program, 1944. Inside were pages of notes, written in looping script. Replication successful. Subject immune to cellular decay. Side effect, memory persistence beyond cortical limits. Dayon squinted. Memory persistence. He was recording consciousness. Harrow wasn't just trying to cure disease, Marla said softly. He was trying to make memory immortal. Lydia pointed to the final page, a diagram of 3 infants labeled H1, H2, H3. Beneath it, a note in faded ink. Airfield extraction successful. Specimens cryo-transferred to secondary facility. Fielding in charge. Fielding? Marla whispered. The teacher who vanished. He worked for them. Thunder rumbled outside, deep and distant. Dion looked up from the folder. There's more. Coordinates for subject repository B. But the ink's smeared. Marla folded the paper into her coat. We'll analyze it later. Let's finish this level first. At the far end of the corridor stood a door labeled Generator Bay. The handle was cold to the touch. When Marla opened it, a rush of air escaped like a held breath. The chamber beyond was circular, walls lined with old power conduits. At its center sat a single glass capsule, taller than a man, cables feeding into its base. Inside floated what looked like a heart, oversized, still pulsing faintly, suspended in amber liquid. Electrodes shimmered with residual current. Lydia stepped closer, face pale. Is that human? Dion stared. No, not entirely. It's a biological core, but maybe a growth engine. Whatever it is, it's still alive. The glass fogged, then cleared as if something inside had responded to their voices. The pulse quickened. A low hum filled the room, like the vibration of a tuning fork. Marla backed away. Dion shut it down. He moved to the panel, fingers flying over switches. The hum grew louder, turning into a rhythmic throb that matched the beat of the heart. Lights flickered along the walls, illuminating words stenciled above the machinery. Archer biosystem, through removal phase. Archer, Marla breathed. The triplet's name. The heart convulsed once, and a burst of light filled the capsule. For an instant, Marla saw images flicker across its surface. 3 boys laughing, a red Cadillac, the face of a young teacher. Then, the light vanished. The silence that followed felt immense. Lydia wiped her eyes. It's showing us what it remembers. Marla turned to Dion. Record everything. If this is some kind of organic archive, it might hold every experiment Harrow ever performed. He connected a portable scanner, the data streaming in bursts. Signals unstable, he said. It's adapting to me. It's pulling my vitals. Disconnect, Marla snapped. Too late. The lights flickered again, brighter now, bathing them in blue-white glare. The hum deepened until it was almost a voice, a vibration that seemed to shape syllables from inside the walls. Remember me. Lydia covered her ears. It's speaking. Dion stumbled back, nose bleeding. It's broadcasting neural patterns, pure memory. It's trying to find a host. Marla grabbed his arm, dragging him toward the stairs. Move. Behind them, the capsule cracked. Fluid spilled across the floor, steaming where it touched air. Something within shifted, stretching against the glass. The heart unfolded like a flower, revealing a mass of translucent tissue that glowed faintly with embedded images, faces, words, the past itself liquefied. They reached the stairwell as the sound rose into a high, keening wail. Outside, the wind howled, sand whipping through the broken hangar doors. The ground shuddered once, twice, and then went still. Marla collapsed against the car, chest heaving. Tell me you got something from that scanner. Dion held up the drive, trembling. Everything, all of it. Lydia stared back at the hangar, now silent. You think it's dead? Marla shook her head. No, it's remembering. They drove away as night closed in, headlights cutting through dust on the horizon. Lightning flared again, brief and colorless. Marla looked at the data drive resting in Dion's lap. That thing down there. It wasn't just a machine? Dion nodded. It was a library, a living archive. If the data's intact, we can trace the entire line, from Harrow to Marin, maybe even beyond. Lydia glanced back toward the airfield, her voice barely a whisper. And if it isn't intact? Then history wakes up on its own, Marla said, and none of us will control what it remembers. For a long moment, none of them spoke. The hum of the engine filled the car, steady as a heartbeat. In the rearview mirror, Marla watched the faint glow rising from the hangar. Blue light pulsing rhythmically in the darkness. The airfield itself, breathing again after 80 years of silence. The drive Dion pulled from the airfield's archive looked harmless, black plastic, faint scorch marks along one edge. But when he connected it to his laptop back at the motel, the machine shuddered like it had taken a breath. Lines of data scrolled faster than his processor should allow, blue code bleeding across the screen. Marla stood behind him, arms folded. It's not supposed to do that, is it? He shook his head. It's reading itself. No directories, no encryption. Just thinking. He tapped a key. The cursor blinked once. Then words began to type on their own. Do you remember the light? Lydia froze. It's communicating. Dion disconnected the cable, heart pounding. The laptop stayed lit for a full 10 seconds after power died. The glow pulsing in rhythm, with the faint hum coming from the drive. Marla leaned close. It's carrying the same frequency we heard at the airfield. The biological archive encoded itself digitally, Dion said. Harrow didn't just store memory in blood. He made it transmissible, information as infection. Marla rubbed her temples. Meaning anyone who reads this data could be exposed or changed by it. By nightfall, Ash Hollow felt like a quarantine zone again. Military vans blocked the highway, and rumor of chemical contagion kept civilians inside. In the motel, the trio worked by candlelight. Electricity had flickered out across town. Dion powered the laptop on battery. Watch this, he said. The screen displayed a map, Ash Hollow at the center, red threads radiating outward like veins. The drives broadcasting low-band RF pulses. Every tour in a 50-mile radius is repeating them. Lydia frowned. It's spreading. Digitally first, Dion said. Then who knows? Marla stared at the map, the lines pulsing like a heartbeat. He made memory contagious. Near midnight, Lydia woke, gasping. Her nose bled faintly. Silver shimmered in the drops that fell onto the motel's linoleum floor. Marla, she whispered, it's in me. Marla was instantly beside her. What are you seeing? Not seeing. Hearing. Lydia pressed her palms against her ears. Voices, children, laughing in a tunnel. It's the triplets. They're inside the frequency. Dion scanned her vitals with a handheld monitor. She's broadcasting at the same wavelength as the drive. Marla grabbed her coat. Then we go back to where it started. We destroy both. Dion hesitated. If we smash the drive, we lose proof. Marla met his eyes. If we don't, it'll turn every signal tower into Harrow's lab. They reached the ridge just before dawn. The airfield glowed faintly blue again, lightning crawling across the clouds without thunder. The hangar's skeleton hummed, as though tuned to a hidden chord. Lydia clutched her head. It's calling me. Marla steadied her. Ignore it. I can't. She stepped forward, eyes unfocused. They're showing me what Harrow saw. Inside, the collapsed stairwell now pulsed with cold light. The hard engine they had left, cracked and steaming, had reassembled, tendrils of tissue grown up the walls like vines. The data drive in Dion's hand vibrated faintly, echoing the rhythm. Dion stared. The signal's feeding it. It's rebuilding from stored code. Marla took the drive. Then we break the circuit. She drew her pistol and fired into the capsule glass, shattered, blue fluid splashing across the floor. The hum faltered, dropped to a low moan, then steadied again, louder. From the broken heart's core, light streamed upward, forming a translucent figure, half human, half static. The outline of a man with gray eyes. Lydia whispered, "Hugh." The figure turned its head. Its voice came not through air, but inside their skulls. "You woke me to forget me again." Marla raised the weapon. "We're ending it." "You can't end memory," the voice said. "You can only choose who keeps it." Images flooded the room. Harrow's lab, children laughing, soldiers signing secrecy papers, the teacher Fielding driving a red Cadillac away from the school. All of it projected onto the walls like film. The memories pulsed brighter until the air itself seemed to hum with grief. Dion staggered, shouting above the noise, "It's downloading into the network, every open signal." Marla grabbed the drive and slammed it against the concrete. Sparks burst. The hum dropped by half. The figure wavered. "Now!" she yelled. Lydia stepped forward, hands glowing faintly silver. "I can draw it back," she said. "It's my blood, my inheritance." Marla reached for her. "Lydia!" But the girl was already kneeling, pressing her palms to the wet floor. The light raced up her arms, her veins shining like molten wire. The spectral figure dissolved into her skin, the hum dying away until only the wind filled the hangar. Silence. Then Lydia collapsed. Marla caught her before she hit the ground. Her skin felt cold, but she was breathing, slow, steady. Dion checked the remains of the drive. A warped piece of metal. Circuits melted. "Signals gone," he whispered. "Every tower just went dark." Marla looked down at Lydia. "At what cost?" They carried her back to the car as dawn bled over the horizon. Behind them, the hangar sank inward, with a long sigh, dust rising like smoke. On the ride back, Lydia stirred. "It's quiet now," she murmured. Marla squeezed her hand. "You stopped it." Lydia opened her eyes. They weren't gray anymore, but a pale, luminous blue. "Not stopped," she said faintly. "Contained?" Dion glanced in the mirror, uneasy. "Contained where?" "In me," she whispered. By evening, federal convoys returned, but the airfield was inert. No energy, though, no evidence. Rivas cornered Marla at the barricade. "Whatever you did out there, it killed the signal. Headquarters wants a report." "You'll get one," she said, handing him a sealed envelope. "But you won't like the ending." He raised an eyebrow. "There's an ending?" "Not for memory," Marla said. "Just for men who think they can own it." She walked back toward the motel, the sky deepening to violet. Lydia sat on the hood of the car, hair lifting in the wind. For a moment, the breeze carried a faint metallic hum. Softer now, almost like a heartbeat, syncing with hers. Marla looked at her and thought of the triplets lost in 1944. The decades of silence, the generations touched by one man's obsession. The echoes were still there, she knew, whispering through blood and wire, waiting for someone else to listen. Rain came to Ash Hollow for the first time in 6 months. Thin, uncertain drops tapped against the motel's warped window panes, carrying the smell of iron and dust. Lydia sat on the bed beneath a flickering lamp, the blue in her eyes pulsing faintly with each heartbeat. Marla watched from the desk, where Dion's ruined laptop lay in pieces. "How do you feel?" Lydia's voice was calm, distant, like I'm dreaming someone else's dream. She looked down at her hands. Silver light traced the veins beneath her skin, moving in subtle patterns, pulses that matched the rhythm of distant thunder. Dion entered with a portable scanner. Your vitals are stable, but you're emitting an electromagnetic field strong enough to short half the motel's circuits. Whatever you absorbed at the airfield is rewriting your biology. Lydia smiled faintly. Or remembering it. Marla leaned forward. What do you mean remembering? I keep seeing fragments, Lydia said. Not visions, memories, faces, names, laboratories, orders typed on military letterhead. They're not mine. They're the archives. Dion's fingers hovered above his keyboard. You're acting as its processor. Marla frowned. You mean she's hosting the data? She is the data now, Dion said quietly. Her DNA's running an algorithm older than digital computing. By morning, the rain had turned into a steady gray curtain. Rivas arrived unannounced, his government badge half hidden beneath a wet coat. He carried a sealed file. Washington wants a containment report. What exactly happened at the airfield? Marla said nothing. Dion stared at the floor. Rivas opened the folder. We picked up a new signal overnight. Same frequency as before, but weaker, originating from within town. Marla's gaze flicked to Lydia. Rivas noticed. You've found your transmitter? She's not a transmitter, Marla said. She's a survivor. Rivas's eyes hardened. Survivor or source. She's coming with me. Lydia stood slowly. You can't contain what's already everywhere. The lights dimmed as she spoke. The motel televisions, unplugged, flickered to life. Grainy film played across the screen, black and white footage of soldiers unloading crates, labeled Human Adaptation, 1944. The sound of children laughing echoed faintly beneath the static. Rivas took a step back. What is this? The archive, Lydia whispered. It's looking for witnesses. Images shifted. Dr. Silas Harrow at a chalkboard. The triplets sleeping in glass cribs. A young man in uniform signing a secrecy oath. Marla felt the air vibrate, as though the past itself were bleeding into the room. Shut it down, Rivas ordered. Dion slammed his laptop shut, but the images persisted, projected now across the motel walls, the ceiling, their own skin. Lydia closed her eyes. It's too late. The data isn't stored in machines anymore. Rivas stared at her, pale. Then where is it? In the blood, she said simply. Every descendant touched by the Project O carries a fragment. I can feel them. Hours later, the storm moved east. Marla drove Lydia and Dion out of town, following a road that wound toward the foothills. The government vans were still parked along the highway, but no one stopped them. Dion tapped the dashboard nervously. If she's right, if the code's biological, how do we even know who else is infected? Marla kept her eyes on the wet asphalt. We don't. We can only control how it remembers. They reached an abandoned chapel, built from adobe and rusted tin. Half collapsed into the desert, Marla had found it on an old survey map. One of the coordinates, scrawled in Harrow's notes. They parked inside the open nave, rain dripping through holes in the roof. Lydia stepped forward, shivering. This place knows me. Dion unpacked his instruments. There's a magnetic anomaly under the altar. They cleared away debris, revealing a small trapdoor. Inside was a metal case wrapped in oilcloth, dry despite the damp air. Marla lifted the latch. Within lay 3 vials of dark fluid and a bundle of photographs. The label on the vials read, Archer Serum B/Gen Progenitor. Marla's breath caught. These are from the 1944 extraction. Lydia touched one vial. The fluid rippled like quicksilver. It recognizes me. Dion scanned it. Same frequency signature as her blood, but dormant. Marla looked at Lydia. Maybe that's the key. Maybe you can stabilize it. Finish what Harrow started without his madness. Lydia met her eyes. And if I fail? Then it ends here, Marla said. No more echoes. Night fell. They set up a small generator. The hum filled the ruined chapel. Lydia stood at the altar, syringe poised above her arm. I can feel it waiting. Sheathadine's hands trembled. We could run simulations first. There's no time, Marla said. The government's already tracking the signal. Lydia smiled. Then let's give them something worth finding. She injected herself. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then the air rippled, temperature dropping, light bending. The chapel walls seemed to breathe. A low resonance filled the space, building into a harmonic so pure, it felt like pressure on bone. Lydia's eyes flared bright blue. I can hear them. All of them. Harrow, Fielding, the children, the soldiers, every memory, every lie. Marla stepped forward. Can you control it? Lydia nodded slowly. I think so. It's balancing, aligning frequencies. The hum softened until it became almost melodic. Dust rose in columns of blue light. Through it, Marla saw fleeting silhouettes. The triplets as boys laughing, then as men, waving from a car that never existed. Lydia lowered her hands. It's done. Dion checked his monitor. Signal strength 0 containment achieved. Outside, the storm cleared, revealing stars sharp as glass. The desert was silent again. Marla looked at Lydia. What happens now? Lydia smiled faintly. Now, the archive sleeps. In me. But memory isn't meant to stay buried forever. Someday someone will dig it up again. Marla nodded. Then we'll be there to tell them the truth. They packed their gear in silence. As they drove away, the chapel behind them glowed faintly for a moment, just enough for the night creatures to pause and listen, before darkness reclaimed it. 2 weeks later, the desert was quiet again. The barricades were gone, the airfield buried under concrete by federal order, and Ash Hollow looked as if nothing had happened. But in the small house on the edge of town, where Marla had rented 2 rooms, the pant still breathed. A single camera lens watched from the corner of the table. Marla checked the focus, pressed record, and looked straight into it. If you're watching this, she began, the official story has already changed. They'll say the contagion was neutralized, that no trace remains. That's a lie. It's sleeping, waiting for someone curious enough to listen again. She glanced at the window. Dion's car idled outside, ready for the drive north. Lydia sat in the back seat, face half hidden by shadow. The blue glow behind her eyes had dimmed, but not vanished. Marla turned back to the lens. Her name is Lydia Grant. She's not dangerous. She's the memory of what we did here. Protect her. She stopped the recording, sealed the camera's memory card in an envelope, and addressed it simply, to whoever finds the truth. Then she switched off the light. The trip north took them through miles of red earth and burned fields. Lydia slept most of the way, breathing evenly, the pulse of light beneath her eyelids, faint as candle flame. Dion drove without speaking. Near dusk, they stopped at a fuel station outside Los Alamos. A news broadcast played on an ancient television. Above the counter, Department of Energy denies allegations of recovered genetic material. In Texas boss site, Marla looked away. The man behind the counter recognized her face from somewhere, but said nothing. Back in the car, Lydia stirred. They're erasing it, aren't they? Yes, Marla said, just like they erased 1944. Lydia watched rain begin to fall on the windshield. Then we leave them the part they can't erase. They reached the mountains by morning. The road wound upward through pine and cloud until signal vanished and the air smelled of snow. Dion found an abandoned observatory perched above a valley. A concrete dome, windows broken, equipment rusted to silence inside. They built a small campfire. Lydia stood beneath the open dome, looking at the stars. The faint hum inside her body harmonized with the wind. "I think it's safe here," she said. Marla studied her. "Safe from them, maybe, but not from yourself." Lydia smiled. "That's what memory is, a mirror that never stops watching." Dehan unpacked a portable transmitter. "You sure about this?" Lydia nodded. "I'll send the raw data, everything Harrow stored, into the sky, scatter it, across cosmic background noise. No one will be able to retrieve it, not completely." Marla handed her the final vial they'd taken from the chapel. "Then, this ends with you." Lydia took it, opened the cap, and poured the dark liquid into the transmitter's core. The device flared, blue light spilling through the dome's cracks. Static filled the air, sharp, clean, almost musical. The mountains echoed with it, and for a moment the stars seemed to brighten. Then silence. The transmitter's light died. The hum inside Lydia faded until only her heartbeat remained. She turned to them. "It's done." Dayon exhaled. "Where did you send it?" "Everywhere," she said. "Into the background of the universe. Let the cosmos remember us." They stayed in the observatory for 3 days. On the 4th morning, a helicopter appeared in the distance. Government insignia, searchlights sweeping the ridge. Marla packed quickly. "Time to disappear," she said. Lydia placed a hand on her arm. "You don't have to run anymore. They won't find what they're looking for." Marla looked at her, at the serenity that had replaced the constant flicker of pain. "What about you?" "I'm not the archive now," Lydia said softly. "I'm the echo. Harrow's memories dissolved when I broadcast them. Only mine remain." Dion joined them at the doorway. "Then we make new ones." They left the observatory before the helicopter reached it. From the valley road, they watched sunlight catch on the dome's glass and scatter in every direction, a last reflection of blue. That night they reached the coast. Waves broke against black stone, the air cool and salted. Marla walked alone to the waterline. She pulled the envelope from her coat pocket, the one labeled "To Whoever Finds the Truth," and placed it inside a waterproof capsule. She set it adrift among the tide pools and watched until it vanished into the dark sea. When she returned, Lydia and Dion were waiting by the car. The horizon glowed faintly, a seam of silver between sky and water. "Where to now?" Dion asked. Marla smiled. "Wherever stories survive." They drove until dawn, the road stretching endless ahead of them. Months later, a new channel appeared on a forgotten corner of the internet. No username, no description, just a single video titled 1944 The Vanished. The opening frame showed static, then Marla's face, tired but resolute. 3 children vanished in 1944. The arrest that followed shocked the town. But what if the real crime wasn't the kidnapping? What if it was memory itself? What if we're all part of the same experiment? Behind her voice rolled soft cinematic music. Old photographs flickered. Harrow, the airfield, the triplets, Lydia standing beneath the observatory dome. "This isn't the end of the story," Marla said, staring straight into the lens. "It's just the part that remembers." The video ended on a faint blue pulse. One beat, then black screen below it. A single pinned comment appeared, posted by an anonymous user. "I can still hear the hum when I close my eyes." And somewhere beyond the reach of satellites, among the background radiation of space, the signal answered. Soft, patient, eternal.